As the world gradually starts to open back up after a long period of lockdown, you may want to start planning some trips for your family. But how do you decide where to go or how to get there safely? In this video, I'm going to share with you some guidelines to keep in mind as you start planning travel in a post-pandemic world, so keep watching. If you're new to Top Flight Family, my name is Carmen, we're the Sognonvi family, and we are all about inspiring families to travel the world in comfort and style. We share tips on how you can save time, reduce hassle, and maximize comfort when traveling with kids. So if that sounds good to you, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next video. And be sure to follow us on Instagram at Top Flight Family. And we're now on TikTok as well, so look for us there. In this video, my goal is to give you practical advice to navigate those difficult decisions around if, when, or how to start non-essential travel. Now, I work as a full-time travel creator, so you could say that I have a vested financial interest in travel getting back to normal levels. But as much as I personally love travel, and as much as I care about the travel industry, it would be irresponsible of me to just be like a rah-rah advocate for everything getting back to business as usual. We cannot ignore the fact that travel was a huge factor in how quickly this virus spread across the world. I believe that right now, when it comes to travel, everyone needs to proceed with caution. We need to be realistic about what risks we can be exposing ourselves and others to, and do our best to make informed decisions. One more thing. You should know that I'm someone who believes in public health. I believe that there are circumstances where it is both appropriate and necessary for us to personally inconvenience ourselves for the greater good. I believe in science and vaccines, and I don't believe that the desire to exercise personal freedom trumps everything else. So if that outlook is gonna rub you the wrong way, this is not the video for you. I would encourage you to click away and find something else on YouTube to watch. Okay, with all that out of the way, let's dive in. Number 1. Accept that there is no returning to normal. A lot of people have been yearning for things to get back to normal so that they can continue traveling the way that they used to. Well, I hate to break it to you, but it looks like that's not going to happen for a long time, if ever. It's possible that COVID-19 may never actually go away, but that it'll become something that just needs to be managed. Mike Ryan, the emergencies expert at the World Health Organization, recently said, "It is important to put this on the table. This virus may become just another endemic virus in our communities, and this virus may never go away." He drew a parallel to HIV. It's been decades since that virus was discovered, but we still have no vaccine for it. What we do have, however, are therapies that allow people with the virus to live and thrive, and that may be the path that we take with COVID-19. Even if by some miracle a vaccine is created within the next 12 to 18 months, there's a strong possibility that many people will flat out refuse to take it. In fact, a recent poll found that only about half of Americans said that they will get one if it becomes available. That being the case, it's not looking like herd immunity to COVID-19 will be probable anytime soon. So basically, there will be no truly 100% safe way to travel in the foreseeable future, which means that planning any kind of travel from now on will be an exercise in risk management. Number 2. Decide what level of risk you're willing to assume. We've already established that any kind of travel will carry some inherent risk. So before you start planning a trip, you're gonna have to decide what level of risk you are willing to take on for yourself and for your family. Now, I have to say that until a few weeks ago, I didn't actually have that much anxiety about resuming travel, because it seemed like the one silver lining of COVID-19 was that kids weren't being affected as much as adults. But as you've probably heard, hospitals are starting to admit more and more kids with a condition called multi-system inflammatory syndrome. It seems to be linked to having had COVID-19 and causes very serious symptoms, including death in a few cases. So that's definitely changed my outlook on the potential risks for my daughters. One of the first decisions you need to make is which destination to visit. It's a good idea to check out statistics of coronavirus infections and deaths before you go, and make sure that you're not visiting a destination that is seeing an upswing in cases. That said, part of this process is going to involve deciding whether or not you actually believe the official statistics. Unfortunately, there have been a few stories in the news recently that have called into question how truthful U.S. states are being in their reporting. In Florida, a data manager for the Department of Health says that she was fired after she objected when her bosses asked her to remove data from public view, showing that Florida residents had reported coronavirus-associated symptoms before cases were officially announced. The department denies that they were manipulating the data. And the Georgia Department of Public Health has been under fire too. A bar chart on their website seemed to show that new confirmed cases in the counties with the most infections had dropped every single day for the past 2 weeks. Only it turns out the chart was taken out of chronological order, and in reality there was no clear downward trend. The department says this was just an accidental mistake, but this error was the third in 3 weeks. It could have been deliberate manipulation of data or just plain sloppiness, but either way, it doesn't inspire much faith. Apart from choosing your destination, you'll also have to decide what form of transportation you'll take to get there and what type of lodging you'll stay in. I'll get into some specific considerations around all these things later in the video, so keep watching. By the way, if you'd like to get a free copy of my free report, 10 travel products every traveling family should own, just go to topflightfamily.com/travel and enter your email. I'll leave a link below as well. Okay, let's move on to the next point. Number 3, understand that tensions may run high. It's no secret that this pandemic has deepened the political and cultural divisions in this country. Tensions are running high, and that's likely to show up during your travels, which may make it less pleasant than travel used to be. So you need to ask yourself if this is something that you really want to deal with. There are going to be changes in the way airport security is conducted, which could lead to longer wait times. This, coupled with people's nerves just being more raw in general, means that little things that wouldn't have provoked anyone before could lead to conflicts. There was a recent Spirit Airlines flight, for example, from Los Angeles to Detroit, where a violent brawl broke out. And it started because one passenger complained that he couldn't sleep because the flight attendant and the other passengers were being too loud. I expect that we'll see more and more incidents like this as travel resumes. Some airlines, like Delta, our favorite, have outlined clear policies when it comes to safety and social distancing on planes. But other airlines seem to be inconsistent in enforcing their policies, and that's going to lead to frustration among passengers. You probably saw this photo that went viral of a recent United flight from Newark to San Francisco that was absolutely jam-packed. There was also a recent Iberia Express flight from Madrid to the Canary Islands where the middle seats were all occupied and the entire flight was almost full. The passengers were so angry about the conditions that they got into arguments with the flight attendants for not enforcing social distancing. Masks are another area that are bound to cause tension among passengers. Many airlines are making it mandatory to wear a mask when you fly, but many passengers aren't willing to comply. Not only that, but some passengers are actually harassing their fellow travelers for wearing a mask. In February, an NFL player and his friend were flying on United from Los Angeles to Newark. A woman who was sitting in the same row as them started harassing him because he was wearing a mask, basically saying, "If you're not sick, then why are you wearing a mask?" Even after he explained that he was wearing it for preventative purposes, she wouldn't stop and became more confrontational, which eventually led to sexual advances from her. She started groping him, grabbing his legs, chest, and groin. At one point, she even ripped the mask off of his face. Not surprisingly, the two men are suing United because the flight attendants didn't do enough to intervene and stop this assault from taking place. And I'd be remiss if I didn't also address the possibility of racial discrimination during your trip. Anti-Chinese sentiment has been on the rise since it's become known that COVID-19 originated in China. Because of that, people of Asian descent all over the world have experienced an increase in incidents of hate speech, discrimination, and even outright violence. In the US, an Asian American reporting center called Stop AAPI Hate said that it received almost 1,500 reports of incidents in 1 month alone. Out of those, 125 were physical attacks. It's not a stretch to think that travelers like me, of Asian descent, will be at higher risk of verbal harassment or even violence when we're traveling. Number 4. Ask yourself if you could unknowingly be a spreader. At the time of this recording, a lot of states are starting to reopen their economies and ease travel restrictions. If you're living in a state that's no longer under lockdown, a good question to ask yourself is this: just because you're allowed to travel now, does that mean that you should? A new study from the CDC has found that 35% of COVID-19 patients are asymptomatic, meaning that they don't show any signs or symptoms. Another recent study out of Australia that specifically studied cruise ship passengers found that 80% of virus carriers showed no symptoms. In other words, just because you don't feel sick doesn't mean that you're not a carrier. COVID-19 tests are still in extremely short supply in the US, which means that most of us are flying blind when it comes to our actual infection status. Even if up until now you've been diligent about sheltering in place at home and social distancing, you could pick up the virus at any point during your trip and potentially spread it to others. I'm not saying this means that nobody should travel at all, but I think we should at least stop to think about the potential risks our actions may cause to others. Number 5. Decide on a mode of transport. Usually when you travel, you probably decide on your destination first. But during this pandemic, your choice of destination will largely be determined by what type of transport you're willing to take. So let's talk about your options from least safe to most safe. Okay, I'm gonna be blunt. Cruise ships are the most dangerous way to travel right now, and I would strongly discourage you from considering them. Between February and March, there were over 800 confirmed COVID-19 cases and 10 deaths from the virus from just 3 different cruise ships. The closed environment of cruise ships creates almost perfect conditions for viruses to spread quickly. Despite these clear dangers, though, several cruise lines are planning to start sailing again soon. Carnival will resume some cruises as early as August 1st, and Norwegian expects to resume most of its cruises by November 1st. The CDC is straight up telling all people to defer travel on all cruise ships, including river cruises, worldwide, because the risks of contracting COVID-19 on cruise ships is that high. This applies especially to older adults and people with serious chronic medical conditions, so please be warned. Planes and trains will be safer options for you to travel. Let's talk about trains first. Amtrak is limiting ticket sales to 50% of seat capacity on reserved services. They're encouraging passengers to put their bags and personal belongings in the seat next to them to encourage social distancing. They've also stepped up their cleaning systems and will be requiring all passengers and employees to wear masks. So there are definitely some new safety precautions in place. Now, let's talk about flying and how safe or not safe it could be. One of the dangers of traveling by plane is that there are so many literal touch points during the process, from checking in to going through airport security to being on the plane itself. Many airports and airlines are taking steps to reduce these touch points by encouraging travelers to download airline apps on their phones and setting up touchless kiosks. In many airports, you'll be expected to scan your boarding pass yourself instead of handing it over to the TSA official. And many airport stores and restaurants are discouraging the use of cash in favor of contactless payment options like Apple Pay. You can expect to see many more plexiglass shields at check-in and gate counters, and of course, cleaning efforts will be stepped up both at airports and on board the planes. Airlines are also trying to minimize the number of touch points once you're on the plane itself. If you've been watching our channel for a while, you'll know that we're big fans of Delta, and I think that they've done an incredible job of being decisive with their policies and communicating them to customers in a clear and effective way. Here are some of the changes they'll be making. Delta will be boarding planes from back to front, with just 10 passengers boarding at a time. They're capping all flights at 60% capacity and blocking all middle seats for protection. Instead of doing the usual rounds of snack and beverage service, flight attendants will go through the plane once to hand out snack bags with a sanitizing wipe. That way they reduce the amount of touch points. Both crew members and passengers will be required to wear a mask at all times, and Delta planes, like most modern aircrafts these days, have industrial-grade HEPA filters that recirculate air 10 to 30 times per hour with fresh air from the outside. Now, that doesn't completely eliminate the chance of contracting the virus, but it certainly does a lot to mitigate the risk. So with all those safety precautions in place, personally, I would feel pretty good about flying Delta. However, as we've seen, not every airline is being as stringent or as consistent in their policies as Delta is, so I would strongly encourage you to do some thorough research before booking a flight. Okay, we've talked about cruise ships, trains, and planes. Now let's talk about cars. Without a doubt, one of the safest ways to travel for the time being will be by driving in your own vehicle. You have complete control over your environment, and you can bring as much hand sanitizer, wipes, and cleaning spray as you need without having to worry about TSA restrictions. That said, there are still some important safety measures to keep in mind, and the biggest one is to minimize the number of touch points as much as possible. Stock up on all the drinks and snacks you'll need for the duration of the road trip so that you won't have to stop and purchase any along the way. When you pump gas, wear disposable gloves and throw the gloves in the trash outside of your car. If there isn't a trash can available and you need to discard it later, seal them up in a plastic bag to avoid cross-contamination. Also, pay for your gas by card instead of cash so you can avoid the face-to-face interaction. Just make sure you wipe down your card with a disinfecting wipe afterwards. When you use a public bathroom, after you've washed your hands, use a paper towel to turn off the faucet and touch the door handle. It's not a bad idea to follow up with some hand sanitizer too. And try to limit your meals along the way to drive-through restaurants where you can eat in the car. This will be another way to reduce your exposure. One thing that your family may be considering is to rent an RV this summer instead of road tripping in your regular car. If so, just be aware that there are some safety concerns about traveling with kids. Many types of RVs only have to meet federal seatbelt standards for the front seats, not for the rear seats. So often, seating in the back is nothing more than cushions on top of plywood boxes, with no safe way to latch a car seat. So I would encourage you to do some research on this before committing to an RV rental or purchase. Number 6, choose your destination wisely. Of course, your choice of destination is going to be heavily influenced by what type of transportation you're comfortable with using right now. But travel restrictions will be another big consideration. Most people agree that domestic travel will be your best bet this summer and fall. First, you have the option to drive instead of fly, and driving is the safest way to get around right now. Second, many countries still have their borders closed or will require you to self-quarantine for 14 days upon arrival. So let's start by looking at what your options are here in the US. Obviously, I won't have time to cover all 50 states in this video, so I'll just highlight a few states that are particularly popular with American travelers. All of this information is accurate as of the time of recording this video, but of course you should check the latest regulations before booking any trips. Alaska is fully open as of May 22nd. They no longer require a 14-day quarantine for out-of-state visitors, but they do require that you've been tested for the virus within 72 hours of boarding a plane to Alaska. If you can't show that documentation, then you'll either be tested at the airport or you can elect to self-quarantine for 14 days instead of being tested. Florida started its statewide reopening process on May 4th. The Florida Keys will be reopening on June 1st, with hotels at 50% capacity. Beaches and hotels in Miami will also be reopening on June 1st, with some social distancing protocols in place. Hawaii began its Phase 1 reopening on May 7th, but out-of-state visitors are still subject to a mandatory 14-day quarantine until at least June 30th. New York has begun reopening certain regions, mostly upstate, that have met specific thresholds. But our hometown of New York City is still in lockdown, and it's not going to begin Phase 1 of reopening until June 8th, at which point it still will not be ready for visitors. Now let's talk about your options for international travel. Again, I obviously won't be able to cover every single country in this video, so I'm going to focus on a handful that are the most popular with American travelers. Let's start with our neighbors to the north and south. Traveling to Canada is just not an option right now. Until at least June 30th, they are only allowing essential travel from the US. Mexico, however, may be a possibility. Popular tourist destinations like Los Cabos, Cancun, and the Riviera Maya plan on reopening for travel this summer, so many resorts there are starting to resume operations. The odd thing is, technically, between now and June 22nd, non-essential travel between the US and Mexico is restricted. But in a weird loophole, this seems to only apply to land crossings. I've actually seen people fly in and out of Mexico recently for non-essential purposes, so it appears to be possible. But it does seem to be a bit of a gray area, so you should double check before booking anything. Now let's talk about the Caribbean, because there are some islands that are starting to open up to American travelers. St. Thomas and St. Croix will be accepting US travelers starting June 1st. Antigua and St. Lucia will reopen on June 4th. Aruba and Grenada also intend to reopen in June, and Belize and the Bahamas are looking to reopen in July. Throughout the region, travelers will either have to be tested on arrival, or they will have to present proof of a negative virus test taken 48 hours before boarding. Most other parts of the world are still closed to American visitors for the time being, so the regions that I've covered are your best bet in the near future. Make informed choices about lodging. If you do decide to travel, another big consideration will be what type of accommodations you're going to book. Some of the important things to keep in mind here are touch points, cleaning protocols, and isolation. Generally speaking, the safest type of lodging during this pandemic will be the one that provides you with the most isolation. A standalone structure that only you and your family will be in. This could mean renting a vacation house or booking a villa instead of a room or suite at a resort. Your first instinct may be to hop on Airbnb or Vrbo to look at houses. Now, you are bound to find some good options on these platforms. The downside, though, is that since the properties are all individually owned and managed, there's little to no guarantee that the spaces are being properly cleaned and sanitized. If you want more assurance that your accommodations are being cleaned properly, it may be a good idea to book lodging with a large hotel chain, as they are going to be very transparent about their cleaning protocols. For example, Marriott will be using electrostatic sprayers with hospital-grade disinfectant to sanitize surfaces. Hilton will be providing disinfecting wipes in high-traffic areas, and they will be removing unnecessary items like pens and paper from rooms to minimize touch points that could lead to infection. Four Seasons will be outfitting their rooms with kits that have masks, hand sanitizer, and sanitation wipes. Their mobile app allows guests to text real-time with staff to request things like luggage pickup, airport transfers, room service, restaurants, and spa reservations. This cuts down on the need for face-to-face interactions. You should also do what you can to reduce your exposure. Use keyless entry instead of picking up your key at the front desk if it's an option. Wear a mask at all times when you're in the common areas of the hotel. If the elevator is crowded, wait for the next one or take the stairs. Bring your own cleaning supplies so that you can sanitize the high-touch areas in your room, like the TV remote, the light switches, doorknobs, faucets, and toilet handles. Avoid the gym and spa even if they're open, and opt for room service rather than dining in the restaurant. One more tip. If you want to play it extra safe, opt out of daily housekeeping service, as that's going to reduce the number of people coming in and out of your space. Number 8. What if you're not ready to travel yet? Listen, there is absolutely no reason that you have to brave it and travel anywhere this year. The safest option is still to shelter in place as much as possible in your own home. But let's say you want to do something and you're not quite ready to hop on a plane or go for a crazy long road trip. Here are some ideas. Do a staycation right in your hometown. We've all been cooped up in our homes so long now that just sleeping somewhere other than our own beds is going to feel pretty exciting. Look for a reputable hotel in your hometown that has clear and effective cleaning protocols and stay the night there. See if there are any camping or glamping options in or near your hometown. You might be surprised. I would never have thought that glamping was a thing here in New York City, but we actually have a whole glamping site on Governor's Island that looks pretty cool. Try a mini road trip. You may not want to stray too far from home right now, but why not go somewhere that's just a 2 or 3 hour drive from your hometown? You'll get a change of scenery, but if things don't go well, you can easily get back home in no time at all. Okay, if you want to learn how to pack so that you can fly carry-on only even with kids, just click there. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.